Benvenuti, bentornato. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. It's game week 5 in Serie A. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend Adam and the Fiorentina fan Andrea. Andrea, how we doing, man?
Really good. I had to go all out after the first win. I never knew how much a first win could mean for a team, but yeah, it felt amazing.
Oh,
So
You've been in
happy.
the desert, man. You've got to enjoy
Yeah.
it. You've got to enjoy it. Adam, how we doing, man? Good weekend?
very good, thank you. Unlike Pulley, the Calgary mascot, I wasn't ushered to the ultras, so that's a positive in its own mind. But more importantly, Rory, how are you, and how's the weather in Milan?
Well, it's apocalyptic at the moment. We are recording whilst they're still deciding whether to play the Atalanta game or not. I'm obviously only about an hour away from Bergamo, and the missus is having to walk home from work at the moment, so I'm sure I'll hear about that after the record. But it's pretty post-apocalyptic out there. But yeah, big weekend. I am repping my Torino shirt to celebrate the table toppers at the moment, right? It doesn't happen often, but Torino are currently top of the table. But we do have lots to cover in this week's episode. We have the Milan Derby, got there in the end. We have the Milan Derby. We have an absolute barn burner down in Lecce, between Lecce and Parma. We'll be talking a little bit about Roma, and we'll do a little bit about Napoli-Juve. And the other game was Venezia getting their first win of the season. Absolutely huge. But before we start the show, we want to take a very quick minute to give our tribute to an icon of the Italian game who sadly passed away last week. We are, of course, talking about Toto Schillaci, the iconic figure of Italia 90. And Andrea, just for the kind of Italian view on just what this guy means, like, it was just the explosion which he hit the scene in that tournament, right? And how key he was to what was a really good campaign for Italy within that tournament, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was very inspirational, obviously, the whole tournament. And obviously, it's just a symbol that, a key moment in the Italian history that you'll remember is Schillaci in that period. So, yeah, he's a defo icon and will be sadly missed. It's really sad.
Yeah, to see the outpouring of emotion here, like when the news broke, like I always kind of use my girlfriend as a reference point. She's not someone who really cares about football, right? But then there'll be figures like when Paolo Rossi died, right? It was kind of like she stopped and was like, oh, wow. Oh, damn, right. This is like a big figure in the nation's consciousness, right? It's not just football. And like Toto Schillaci was the same thing. When the news came through, she was like, oh, wow, this is like, that's just really sad, right? And I think for me personally, my first recollection of Schillaci, because I was a little bit too young for Italian 90, but my first recollection of him is the Irish comedy film The Commitments, which is about a band in Dublin. And there's a very famous scene where the character has a t-shirt which just says "fuck Schillaci" with the Shamrocks on it. And this, obviously he scored the goal in Italian 90 that knocked Ireland out of the tournament. But despite this, he became a bit of a cult hero in Ireland because he sums up what was and what is still considered one of the greatest summers in Ireland's history, right? It was like the first time they'd been to a huge major tournament. It was this huge wave of optimism. And despite the fact that he scored this goal, he was still like, the Irish people loved him. He later went on to feature in an advert for Smithwick's beer. Like they really took him to their hearts. And yeah, just whenever I think of him, I just think of that t-shirt because it's the Irish sense of humor, but also like this tribute to this man as well. And I think, Adam, I don't know about you, but when I saw the footage of him at Italia 90, there's just something so beautiful about the grain, the color, everything about those images just looks incredible, right?
Yeah, I think also for context, he wasn't the chosen striker, was he, when the tournament started? So I think the fact that he became this kind of icon as a result of that tournament just goes to show like how things can happen in certain ways, but it doesn't matter. It's all about the occasions. And if you can live and kind of, I suppose, deliver on those occasions, you become one of theirs. I think what was unknown was the extent of how much pain he was going through, obviously. And it only came to light, I think it was 2 weeks prior to the announcement of his death that obviously he was rushed to hospital. So yeah, really sad. But I mean, everyone's got a fond word for him, even in those periods when he played for the likes of Juventus and Inter, where he wasn't necessarily scoring free flowing in that respect. He was still kind of considered, I suppose, such a great man as well as a striker. And even that time that he spent in Japan, they love him as well. That's what we forget about that as well. So Toto Scalacci, rest in peace, my friend.
No, completely. Absolutely. So, guys, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk all things game week 5 in Serie A. And here we are, game week 5. And we're starting with the Derby della Madonnina. And well, once again, Adam, we hit the nail on the head by saying Inter were going to walk this and absolutely nailed our predictions as Milan win 2-1 and Inter flatter to deceive. I think for both of these teams, seeing their performances midweek, I was even more sure that Inter were going to walk this and Milan were going to just absolutely collapse, right? Inter were really impressive against Man City, really implemented their system, forced Man City to bend to their will, play beautiful football, had the better chances. Saying, okay, this is the perfect springboard. Go into the derby, you're flying. Milan, give away, get an early goal against Liverpool, but then completely collapse. And you think, okay, Fonseca's not had it. There's no rescue in this team. Adam, how did Milan win this game? I don't understand. And how were they the better team throughout?
I think if you're talking about characteristic, obviously Fonseca must have instilled this kind of confidence within them. And when it comes to derbies, it's all about having that grit, determination. It's not necessarily about the skill, but you could see there was a hunger within that Milan squad ahead of this game for Inter. I think I reflected prior to kickoff and went, okay, Fonseca's really bold here by going with a 4-4-2 formation with Tammy and Alvaro Morata up top. But you could see the tenacity in both of them. You could see the tenacity within the squad. The likes of Emerson Royale, despite his maybe blunder for the initial equaliser for Inter perspective, he had a really strong game. Pulisic, for example, never let the midfielders have a moment to breathe. The moment that he intercepted that pass from Mkhitaryan when he was trying to control it, you sensed that there was going to be something. He'd kind of already threatened that earlier. And so did Alvaro Morata as well when he had that header, which was slightly tipped over by Jan Sommer. But I think, in summary, I would say Fonseca approached it in such a way that he gave them the confidence and still this kind of belief within that squad. And I think this provides a little bit of redemption for Fonseca as well as Milan. I think had the result gone the other way, I think we'd be saying goodbye to Fonseca. I don't think he stands a chance, but this completely changes the way that Milan's season pans out now, because they're on level points with Inter, which is mad to think at this stage, but they are. And that whole win just breathes a bit more confidence to what they do going forward, Rory. I think I was just taken aback by how lethargic Inter were, and I think there's going to be things that we'll kind of go into detail, but I think also Inzaghi got it wrong on the night. I think he got the substitutions wrong. I think he got the whole approach was wrong, but it just felt like, I don't know about you, Rory, and maybe Andrea as well, but it felt Inter were tired. They looked tired, and I was surprised when I spoke to you, Rory, offline when we were talking about the match as it was going live, that he didn't rotate more. Zielinski for me had a fantastic performance. Mkhitaryan's legs don't feel or don't certainly look like they're up to the pace of the game anymore. So was this the right decision? There's a lot of question marks there. And I think if you look at even Marcus Thuram's performance up front, it didn't look like the Thuram that we saw, say, 12 months ago, where he was really, running the Milan defense anyway ragged. So full of credit to Fonseca and that Milan approach, because that was phenomenal.
Before we get in deep into Inter, I want to talk, Andrea, for Milan, is it as simple as, all I could think when I was watching the game was that Fonseca's turned around and said, no team has ever won 6 derbies in a row. Don't be the team that loses 6 in a row, right? Was it that simple, or do you think it was the way they set up just limited Inter so much and just didn't allow them to express themselves?
I think a lot of it comes to do with the fact that they were under such intense pressure, and I think he must have felt as well that this game had to get a result. So I think that kind of was shown in the team and the way they were so together and so, which we haven't seen throughout the season. You could even see it in the celebrations in the winning goal and after, how much there was kind of that togetherness, which I think was another big concern. But we're starting to see, and hopefully that kind of improves with Milan. I think it just clearly just surprised Inzaghi. I don't think he expected
Mm,
Fonseca to do it, and I think it's fair play. I think it shows a good character in Fonseca. The fact he could appreciate that what he was kind of doing in present time wasn't really working, and if he was going to get a result, he was going to have to do something drastic or go for some sort of experiment, and it paid off. I mean, obviously, if it didn't pay off, it would have gone the other way, but to be fair, you got to give credit to him. The fact that in such a big game, he took that big risk
mm,
and it paid off well. I think the directness of Milan is something that Inter struggle with in general against teams that
Mm.
have direct play. And Milan just used their wings and their pace up in the final third. And I think obviously that did struggle. And it's interesting what Adam said about the tiredness. And I noticed that too, especially the weird one where he kept DeMarco on the whole game. He was
yeah.
definitely out of it. And
Mm,
Bastoni has so much energy, and you can see how Bastoni in the final third can still give
Yeah.
you something as well.
mm.
So I was a bit surprised with taking Bastoni off DeMarco, but yeah, I think Inzaghi as well. Substitutions, he got it wrong as well.
Yeah, like massively, massively. Before, like, we're going to move on to Inter. I just wanted to very quickly say, like, Reinders had one of those games where you remember
Yeah.
how good he can be. He was absolutely fantastic in that midfield.
Mm,
Gabbia, I didn't say. I saw him as the unlikely hero, right? It's such a beautiful
mm,
story, like Milan fan from birth and scores the winner in such a like crucial moment when they really needed it.
mm,
And that side of Leao and Teo still is by far Milan's biggest threat consistently. And I thought they again, like especially Teo, was really, really impressive in
mm.
this game. But let's talk about Inter and how they kind of I found it really fascinating. I think I messaged you, Adam, when he took Barella off,
Mm,
and I was like, that's a weird one.
yeah.
Like now, obviously, regular listeners of the pod will know I'm obsessed with Barella, and he like really think he should be playing every minute God sends. But I felt like the second they took him off, there was just no ignition in that midfield. There was no
Mm,
like that ball forward, that ball through. There just wasn't that person who was able to get the ball, turn, and bring them forward. And I just
mm.
think, like Adam, do you think Inzaghi overthought it? Do you think it was like? Do you remember when he first came into Inter? He would always make odd substitutions, or the second
Yeah.
someone got booked, they'd be taken off. Or he had this thing of
Mm,
like set times for substitutions and set
yes.
substitutions. Do you
Mhm.
think he kind of fell into that habit because he could see the game wasn't going how he'd planned, or because there were some odd decisions?
I think he knows this season he's going to have to rotate that squad a lot more than probably in previous seasons, given the extent of the fixture list with the Champions League. He wants to protect and maybe maintain that they are the Scudetto holders, at least for this season. But then you've got, obviously, he's a cup master in that respect as well. So he'll be gunning for all of the competitions that are available to Inter. I think he did read it wrong in terms of the substitutions and the personnel. Personally, I think there was an opportunity prior to the 11 being announced that he should have rotated. For me, Denzel Dumfries, there seems to be some sort of politics with his contract, so that
Mhm.
was potentially a reason why maybe he was involved or lack of involvement in that respect. I think David Fratesi proved why he doesn't seem to start very often for the Inter squad. Like I say, Zielinski, I thought had a very good game against Man City, proved his abilities. It's not uncommon for him to play back-to-back games. He did it with Napoli, for example. So why wasn't he in this occasion? I felt Çalhanoğlu had a really poor game as well. He got a really poor yellow card, and he pretty much moaned. He moaned for the majority of it. But I think what got me was how direct, as Andrea said, Milan were. They were able to kind of dribble straight through the middle. That's really uncommon for like Inter to be broken that easily and carved so easily at times through that middle. The amount of counterattacks that Milan had, it was just a breath of fresh air from a Milan perspective, but such a concern from an Inter point of view. And it kind of, for me, highlighted the left-hand side, which Andrea mentioned about DeMarco, but also from a defensive point of view, at times there were drags in the middle of the park. Sometimes I feel like with Acerbi, his legs aren't as what they used to be. For example, he's got the mind, so he can read the game quite well. But actually, you need someone with a bit more stamina and someone that is able to keep up with runners. I felt like he was being dragged from place to place. So I feel they could have got that a bit better. I think Damian would have been probably the better option out of the two, personally. Acerbi offers that aerial threat, but actually you need someone that's going to be keeping up with the pace. I just
Even
think
Bissek,
completely got wrong.
He's been good when he's come in this season. I think he's
Mm.
clearly physical. He's quick. I don't think he's really put a foot wrong, Bissek. And I think even having someone as him as a deputy, like you can trust him more. I know that Milan Derby is a bloody big game, right? But Bissek's played in quite a few games this year, I want to say. So like that's another option off the bench there where you can think maybe this isn't working, or if you want to rotate a bit more. But Andrea, sorry, I just completely cut over you there, Adam. I apologize. But
That's all right.
but Andrea, do you think, I was just looking at Inter's matches, like, so they've drawn with Genoa, they've beaten Lecce, which is fine, right? They had that really good performance against Atalanta, drew with Monza, and now lost to Milan. It's not the most encouraging start to the season for Inter. It's not been what we really expected, I think. Do you think this is just a bad day at the office, or is there a wider issue here with Inzaghi's Inter and what they could achieve this season?
I think that's a great question because I kind of see both sides, because I feel like the final third of Inter has looked really off this season. Like even Martinez, I think you were talking about Thuram before, but even Martinez doesn't even look like. I'm noticing this because I have in my Fanta culture, he's not doing anything. But but honestly, I think the link up between those two hasn't gone well either. My only question I'd say about this particular game is I wonder if after that Man City performance, there was a bit of complacency that crept in, that they were imagining they would play Milan off the park and have most of the ball, and they would find a way to get the job done. That's the only thing I can think of it in terms of it being just an off day. But I think there is a bigger issue in that final third. Martinez by now would be scoring goals last season. Thuram would be having much more of an impact. Those runs in behind and through the channels that Thuram hasn't been doing as much either. And I don't know if there's the restriction in the defence, like Adam was saying, you kind of alluding to about the pace of the midfield. And I wonder if that's kind of slowing down the whole build up and possibly affecting, Thuram and Martinez in the final third. But yes, I think certainly in that final third aspect, I think there's a concern. I think midfield and defence will kind of come through. I think there's too much quality there. And of course, in the final third, they should have the quality, but it just seems it's not kind of clicking at the moment, which just seems odd because they were last season. So, but again, I wonder if it's the complacency thing of that man from the Man City game.
I think you've definitely got a point there. We do also have to say they had a day less rest and had to travel, whereas Milan were playing in Milan.
Stayed.
Like, there is a factor there. But I think you're absolutely right. I think they thought we've gone toe to toe with the best team in the world. Milan are crap. Let's see what happens. Right, like this will be fine. But for Milan, Adam, before we move on from this game, encouraging signs, I suppose, a lifeline for Fonseca, flag in the ground, marker. We can go against what is apparently the best team in the league. We can play them off the park. Morata and Tammy, that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Is there something here for Milan to build on and Fonseca can get a second wind and maybe get their season started?
Yeah, definitely. I think they needed that kind of result, really. And although we kind of said there's a lot of flaws in that Liverpool game, even against Venezia, they had an easy ride, really, in that 4-0 victory prior to this. I feel like this is something that they can get behind. They've got something that is something they can build as terms of a squad as well. It'll be interesting to see how he kind of looks at it going forward in that respect, because Derby is one thing, but to be consistent is another, and that's the key now. So he's got that kind of win. He's won that over the fans. That's good, but it is going to be the next stage. How can you maintain that momentum? I think, obviously, one of the things that I put in my notes was how Leao was scapegoated prior to this game, being shown as the maybe the reason why their form hasn't been performing as well. He's obviously had his little spat in the press with Di Canio as well. But, I think that's been very harsh on Leao to blame him for what's been, for the majority of I'd say, a best part of a year, really. The form hasn't been directly down to Leao. It's been the whole team. They've been in transition. They're still in transition, to be brutally honest. But Leao has been the bright spark in some of those moments. Granted, he's not consistent enough. And that is a personal criticism aimed at him quite regularly. However, got to remember, he's still kind of young. He's still learning his trade in some respects. And, yes, I think Milan's fans in general expect him to be the main core in terms of establishing good performances. He should be the one that inspires the squad. I think that's a bit harsh because I don't necessarily think that's his kind of role. His role is necessarily to be an outlet at times, and I think that's the balance. He's still developing his game, Rory.
I can kind of understand where their frustration comes from, though. Like, I can kind of understand. Like, he is their highest paid player, I want to safely assume, right? I assume he's on the most money. Maybe Teo is slightly ahead of him, but I imagine Leao is either on more or not far behind him. And he does always kind of have the feeling of he's got one foot out the door. The way I'm looking at it, I always feel like he seems like he's waiting for the big move to come, right? He signed the last contract because they won the Scudetto, and it was like, this big thing of like, and then the club hasn't really matched his ambitions. We've all seen that, right? Last season was a disappointment. The squad hasn't been built how you'd hoped. Like, and I kind of always get this feeling that he's kind of like, I'll be gone soon enough. And like, as well as he has performed, maybe his attitude isn't quite there. And if I was a Milan fan, I think it would wind me up. It kind of gives me that Ivan Toney vibe of like, I'm the best player at your club, but I know I'm going somewhere else. If you know what I mean. Like, Andrea, am I onto something, or do you think I'm reading too much into this? I can kind of sympathize why Milan fans get wound up with him.
I think there's quite a few elements into it. Yes, I kind of agree with you. I think, there's too many things going on in general behind the scenes. So I feel like they do play factors, and we have seen it throughout. So yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what season he has, because he has had a very good start to the season. He is still their best player. So it is this weird dichotomy, right? Also, last thing on this, we just have to talk about Pulisic in big games, because that is against Liverpool now and that's against Milan. He's a player that low-key has been very good since he joined Milan. I wasn't sure if he was going to be a good signing. He had a pretty good season last season. He's had a very good start to this season. That goal was absolutely beautiful. Just the sheer determination of that run and to get the finish was absolutely incredible. He's a player that I've never really rated that much. I've always thought, it's fine, he's not the LeBron James of soccer like they'd have you believe, but he's having a very good season and has been a very good signing, I think. So yeah, probably just slightly behind Reinders for man of the match for me, I think. But incredible win for Milan, incredible performance, something to build on. For Inter, maybe just a bit of a rude awakening and a slap in the face of this Scudetto isn't going to be easy. Like, I'm going to set the question towards the end of the episode so you can think about it in the background. Is this going to be a super open Scudetto race? Because Torino are currently top and no team is really stepping out in front of everybody else and going, we're the favourites, right? So I'll throw that back at you at the end of the episode, guys. So let me know what you think. But let's go to the next game and let's talk about, well, it was a surprise package on a Saturday afternoon. Saturday evening, my girlfriend asked me, why the hell are Lecce on in my house? Not our house, in my house. So I knew my place instantly, right? Why the hell are Lecce on in my house? And I thought, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I sitting down and watching Lecce Parma on a Saturday evening? Surely there are better things to do. But what a game. I could not believe the scenes. Parma continue an incredible run of 3 games, 3 red cards. Lecce also had someone sent off. It was absolute scenes. Let's go through it chronologically. So first, Lecce started really well, right? I feel like Parma weren't really in the game. Lecce, the ability that they have to on the break is absolutely incredible. Now, Banda is a player I bought in my Fantacalcio and thought they're going to build the team around him, but now they've brought Dorgu, and it seems like he's much, much better. Like, Adam, you've kind of noted it down on the little preparation we do for this show, but Dorgu looks like he's had a big impact on their season in the early days, right?
Yeah, he looks a hell of a talent, to be fair. I think he was quoted as potentially being linked with a move to the Premier League. Not this summer, but last summer, believe it or not. So there was a lot of scouts already for his services. But yeah, I mean, the directness, his pace, it's a threat. It's a huge threat. And that's something you have to credit Lecce in terms of the way they are able to nurture these talents, but also bring them on board. So yeah, as you alluded to, great threaded ball to him, and he stabs it past the Parma goalkeeper Suzuki. And you're thinking, wow, this is a great start for Lecce. And then moments later, obviously, was it the 50th, 59th minute even, Kristovic adds to it. And you're thinking, well, right, Lecce cruise this now, because Parma didn't really have much to offer, did they, Rory?
No, I found it really disappointing, their performance. I think in the last couple of games, obviously they've kind of been goal heavy, really entertaining. And
Yeah.
I just felt like they were lacking that link, that final ball. Every time they got into the midfield, Lecce were able to just close it down. Like the centre backs, like Bashiotto, is just able to pick everything up and just push Lecce forward again. I felt there was a real lack of creativity in the Parma team. But Lecce just could not finish their chances. They had so many chances to put this game to bed. And then they get the red card. So now, Andrea, you've seen this. I thought clearly he throws his hand at him, right? But is it a bit soft, or do you just think it's stupid? I feel like the Palmer player makes a big deal out of it, right? But it's a red, right?
Yeah, it was soft, but I think at the end of the day, it's one of those ones where the referee sees it. They see it and they have to give it. If they don't give it, it will be there'll be a lot of complaints. But yeah, I thought it was really soft, to be honest.
Like the player went down far too easy,
Yeah.
but just the stupidity of it. The ball's on the other side of the pitch. It's a tussle at the back end of the area, and then it just gives you that thing of like, okay, well now Palmer are back in the game. Right, Palmer are back in the game. Let's kick on, and then 11 minutes later, early in the second half, Cancellieri decides to just completely take out Kustovic. I think it is Kustovic who takes him down. And they score immediately from that free kick. The second Cancellieri went off and Kustovic lined up the free kick, I went, Lecce are going to score it. Yep, okay, 2-0, right, game over. And you think, this is it, it's done, right? Lecce have got this wrapped up. And then 90th minute, Kustovic runs through on goal, absolute sitter. Adam completely misses it. And then Palmer get themselves back in the game. Like, is this just a complete head loss from Lecce, right? A complete head loss in the last 3 minutes, 4 minutes. But you've got to commend the spirit of Palmer and the fact they are 100%. Keeping themselves in these games and they are not having problems scoring goals.
They're not, but
the first 90 minutes.
Yeah, very true, very true. But I think that's the thing that Parma do, don't they? They kind of have that never die attitude, really, in terms of the game approach. They got the tricky wingers. Dennis Mann again, proving what an incredible talent he will be this season. But yeah, it was Almqvist, the man that they bought from Lecce, comes and haunts them. He does the no celebration to indicate that he's loyal to the cause. However, only minutes later, a ball into the box and Haunuts gets the header past Vladimir Falcone, who had another great match in this one. And yeah, points are shared. So full of credit to Parma. I love this side and the way they approach it. But Lecce, I'm surprised because Gotti's there. He's very much a more defensive, pragmatic style of manager. And yeah, I mean, he's got to probably reevaluate his approach with Lecce because that's what their foundations were there for. He built them on the good basis when he kept them up last season. It feels like they're having to rebuild again. And I don't know, you'd have to be concerned about Lecce going forward because you can't be that open in that circumstance in the space of a couple of minutes, really. Madness.
I did also notice how much difference it makes when there's two players off the pitch. There was just space everywhere. It was completely end to end. Like one team attacked, and then there was just all the space at the other end, just another long ball, and everybody, like the whole pitch was open. It was utter chaos. I do have to say that I like Lecce's recruitment, though. I really like some of the players they find. I like Gaspard is the other centre back. I was trying to remember his name because they had a different name for him on the telly. I thought he was very good as well alongside Bashiotto, but they do manage to find these players like Koulibaly in midfield, looks very good. I completely disagree with the utter woke nonsense of Rebic wearing number 3 as a striker. I don't like this. But that's a very, very interesting acquisition as well. He did not look good. Right,
no,
but that's an interesting acquisition alongside when they got Umtiti from Barcelona on a free, right? They just get these random big players. I'm like, okay, maybe they can do a job for us. I thought he looked terrible, but it's an interesting thought of trying to get him in a bit of experience.
Sure,
definitely like Serie A standard, just not going to get you many goals. But I like their recruitment. I think there's enough there that there are worse teams than them in the league this year.
Yes.
But Andrea, I'm going to keep banging the drum, and I want to know your thoughts on Falcone because I think this guy needs a big move. Now, I know he's 29. He's not as young as I thought he was, right? But he is good enough to be playing for one of the top teams in Serie A. I feel like every game I see him, he's one of the best shot stoppers in the league. And his the command of his area in general is very good. Like, I think he's always a sign for me of just the general quality of goalkeepers in Serie A, that even Lecce have got a very good goalkeeper. He needs that big move, right?
I think he's at the right age for it, definitely. It's just whether I think it's just quite common in Serie A that a lot of teams have these amazing goalkeepers. Even the lower you get, they've still got really good goalkeepers. It just to see where perhaps in Serie A he'd go to. Perhaps maybe a replacement for Bologna in goal. Who knows? But that could be an option. But yeah, certainly he's always been so consistent as well. And again, being at a team where you're conceding a lot of shots and chances and making such an impact says a lot as well. So yeah, I hope he does. I think he's proven enough. But yeah, maybe it will happen. We'll see.
Fingers crossed. I always feel like Roma could do with another keeper, and he'd be a decent shout for that. But we do, as we did say, Parma did struggle to score, but it was partly down to Falcone stopping everything. I think the commentator when I was watching the game was like, Falcone contra Parma, it's just him on his own, stopping everything. That was incredible. My feed was an absolute nightmare. So in the 90th minute, it started messing up, and it went from 2-0, and then it jumped to the equaliser, but I thought it was the first goal. So I saw them score the first goal, and then they ran into the corner. I was like, guys, it's only one. What are you doing? Like, get back to the centre circle. And then it caught up, and I was like, oh, right, it's 2-2. I get it now. I was like screaming at the telly, like, guys, relax, get back. Like, yeah, dodgy feed. It's never good, is it? But incredible game, and, where you least expected it in Serie A. Two teams that are kind of always worth watching, I think, but especially Parma at the moment. Let's move on to the next game. Adam, I'm going to let you lead us into this one. I put a tweet up saying, Venezia have scored a goal. Oh my God, Venezia have scored a goal. Well, they actually won a game, Adam.
It's
obviously we have to say at the beginning of this game, firstly, we hope that we see Malinowski back on the pitch soon, because that injury looked absolutely horrendous. We don't like to see any players injured, and that looked like, oh God, the pictures were horrendous. But was that part of the factor why Genoa didn't get this game over the line? Was it more than that? Like, do we have to give Verona their flowers? How did you see it?
I think you can certainly say it played a small part in terms of like the momentum in the second half. First half, though, credit to obviously Venezia. They actually had the better of the chances. They could have taken the lead. Busio, who did eventually score the first one, he had a chance early on, and Venezia just looked like they were taking on Genoa pretty much at their own game. Genoa did struggle, and I think maybe to an extent it might be the factor of so many transfers this window have taken place. The goalkeeper went to Inter. You've got the likes of Gudmundsson, who we'll allude to later on. That's a big goal threat lost, as well as Retegui. So, these are key players that were part of their staple for last season. And that's the reason why Genoa kind of shocked and surprised a lot of the kind of teams last season. And I think that's the difficult act for Gilardino to do, is to keep that momentum going whilst playing on the budget, essentially. They haven't got the funds to necessarily fund the kind of whole season and get these kind of players in through the door. But, the likes of Balde, for example, for Genoa was really poor. And yeah, I felt that Venezia really did have the opportunities in this match. And although we're talking about Malinowski and the fact that he had a horrific leg break, which, you have to go and see it really to understand the full extent. But essentially, no one's around him. He tries to clear the ball and, he kind of crumbles to the ground. It's horrific to see. And I would never want to endure the pain that he probably went through at that very moment. But yeah, I think that really did shock the Genoa team at overall. And, Venezia took full advantage through Busio. They obviously had a penalty as well, saved Polo, who missed his penalty, but eventually does get a second. So that confirms a 3 points for Venezia, and Di Francesco gives him a bit more breathing space, so to speak, and maybe something that he can build behind, Rory. But I think Genoa were just poor on the day as well.
I do have to say, Galini was horrendous in this match. I feel like both the goals were massively preventable. I feel like the Busio goal is kind of a cross that just happens to go in because he looks like he's shepherded. He thinks it's going beyond the post, right? Like Galini thinks it's going out, and then it's in. It looks horrendous. The Pogiampalo goal, I feel like Galini could have done better. like with the first shot, because it comes back at him and then he just wellies it, right? But I feel like he could have done a bit better there. I just feel like with Glean, I thought it was a really disappointing performance from him, and Genoa should, like, on a different day,
I've
Venezia
never really
held the
rated
day
him
better.
as a goalkeeper.
No,
I've never
well,
really
this is
rated
I
it.
was
him.
about to say
This is the
that.
problem.
Yeah,
At
like
Fiorentina, he was like he played like 1 or 2 games. He was going to be the starter, and Terracciano quickly replaced him because I think
That
that's
says it
why we
all.
have trust issues with goalkeepers because we've had a few, and Golini's one of the reasons why Terracciano's played all these years because they gave him the starting spot and flopped after like 2 games. So yeah,
because
I've never rated him either.
he was
Yeah,
at Napoli last year. He was at Spurs before that, right?
Atalanta before that as well.
Atalanta
Yeah.
before that. My God, he's on a world tour. He's on
he has a great.
an England and Italy tour. Anyway, he's going
Yeah.
like. I hope he's not bought a house. But anyway, yeah, I thought his performance was absolutely terrible, and it really, really didn't help. But for but for Venezia, as you said, some signs of promise there. Big win. That's all that matters, right? I do kind of worry about Genoa a little bit in Gilardino because it has been, again, a slow start of the season for them. They've only won 1, 2 draws, 2 losses. Not quite as exciting as we'd have hoped, but as you said at the beginning, they've kind of sold a lot of players this summer.
Yes.
So kind of there is a bit of adjustment to be made up for there. But next, we are going to talk about, well, it's all come down to earth a little bit for Udinese. I hope it's about to happen at some point. But Andrea, the big news this week, we didn't really have time to react to it, but De Rossi sacked at Roma. Juric brought in almost instantly. I think their cars probably passed each other in the car park. How did you react to the news? What do you think about it? It's quite a safe pair of hands, Juric, right? Before we get into the game, like it's quite a safe pair of hands, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was shocking how quick it was in terms of obviously not much of a season's gone by, but I still think it made sense. I think De Rossi did come. I think we forget that De Rossi was only there for like last season for like maybe more than half of it, and he had that boost of like being new, exciting, and I think that kind of showed in their results and their play. And I think obviously this is the first season where he's got a lot of pressure of like continuing that. And I think there was too many signs in these games that it just wasn't working out. And I think Roma can't really afford to lose these big places, and they got to try and challenge for the Champions League with the kind of players they're trying to bring into the team. And yeah, I think if perhaps they're just thinking ahead of maybe De Rossi would have stopped them from getting further nearer to higher in the table.
It seems odd, though, because they've spent quite a lot of money with
Yeah.
players I assume that
Yep.
De Rossi was broadly agreeing with, right? We know he wanted another winger. He didn't really get the winger he wanted, but he kind of would have broadly agreed with these signings. Is this a sign for any Everton fans that are listening that their club has just been bought by people that don't have much foresight, Adam? What do we think?
Well, they're going to find a match with Ivan Juric, aren't they? Because he's been known for having fisticuffs with board members. So yeah, I can't wait. But yeah, I think personally, I disagree. I think De Rossi showed in the last game prior to his sacking against Genoa that there was signs of recovery. I felt like they're on the road to recovery. Like you say, why would you spend 100 million euros on players? Why would you give De Rossi a 3-year contract back in, obviously, April it was roughly, I think, or June roughly officially? It all seems really odd, but it was quite clear from the news that did come out and transpired. There was a lot of arguments. De Rossi was having secret words with Totti about the relationships that were going on. You also have to look...
Absolutely classic.
I know. You've got to love it. But also, I would allude to the fact that Nikola Zalewski's also been used as a linchpin for all of this as well, because he was omitted from the squad, but apparently De Rossi wasn't the man that wanted him omitted from the squad. Zalewski then threatens to do some legal action over the Roma board as well as the Friedkins. It suggests to me that he's got some dirt over them. Personally, I feel like, and he's been readmitted to the squad. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Because suddenly it's all fine, all roses. But yeah, I think if you look at the reaction of the Roma fans in particular, less the ultras, but more the general base, they are really frustrated at the Friedkins and their kind of philosophy. So it'll be interesting for Everton fans. how they go about approaching it. But I think, look, stability-wise, they will pump some money into the club. It's just going to be a question of how patient they get with the Everton club in terms of what they deliver on the pitch. And, I don't necessarily think everything that they've delivered at Roma has been all rosy. Look, Jose alluded to the fact that they haven't bought well for the club, and I think they are paying the price recently. So let's wait and see. I don't have my doubts about Ivan Juric, by the way. I think he's a really good coach and he deserves this opportunity, but I think the circumstances weren't great personally.
Yeah, they talk a good game, the Friedkins. I think they talk a really good game, but they don't really deliver on it very often. Look at the stadium that they keep announcing. But if we talk about this game, Juric came in. Now, it came out that Juric has been looking or watching the teams that Roma were due to play, right? So this was very much kind of set up of how this was going to happen. They've kind of planned it a little bit. But Andrea, for him to come in and instantly... Now, obviously, Udinese were a little bit more than accommodating. This was not a good performance by Udinese. No. But for Roma to come in and instantly 3-0, Dovbyk looks like he's full of confidence. Dybala scores, everything's going quite well. Is it just a fact of like Dovbyk got his first goal, now he gets another one? Or do you think Juric has come in and just like kind of brought a bit more structure, a bit more solidity to that group?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's also the new bounce of the manager as well. That always plays a factor. Players prove themselves. They need to try and, regain trust in the new manager. But certainly, I think Juric has the experience at the same time. And I think that does say a lot. But it probably goes back to your point about possibly some tensions. Maybe there was even some tensions with De Rossi and the players. So obviously, once you get to that point, then it kind of makes sense. I guess we will never know, but it kind of sounds like there was tensions in quite a few different aspects of Roma. So yeah, potentially that could have been why.
But what I did really like, Adam, before we move on to the next game, is El Shaarawy as a wing back. I really love that. We've been like Roma were looking for a bit of width. Now, I don't know how good his defensive game is, but that's quite a bold move, right? A 30, however old Shaarawy is now, using him. No, you've got a few more kilometers to run yet, mate. Like, that's quite an interesting call, eh?
Very interesting call. I think you are right to kind of question maybe his approach and maybe his, I don't know what the right word to describe it, but essentially, I think he offers a lot in terms of that position, right? In terms of the pace, trickery. Whether he's the long-term solution, I question that. But yeah, I think we alluded to it previously with De Rossi, is that I feel January will be the window where they kind of look at that wing-back opportunity and see what is out there, because Celik on one side isn't convincing for me. But on the left-hand side, they haven't really decided who that option is going to be. So Zalewski's been tried out there. Angelino, I really do like Angelino on times. Yeah, but I think he's been brought into that defensive line duties. It does make you question where Hummels and Hermoso really fit into this after they were brought in as well. But yeah, I think, there's so many questions in this squad. We've kind of put in the notes, I think, Pellegrini and Dybala, 2 number 10s. You've still got Sule as well. So it is a bit odd at the moment. I don't think De Rossi was necessarily happy with the balance of the squad yet. Possibly maybe the plan was that Dybala would go to Saudi, and it hasn't transpired. So maybe that is a lot of the reason why maybe they're a bit annoyed with the whole situation, because then they tried to force Zalewski out of the club to go to Galatasaray, and he refused flat out. So fascinating times for Roma. But I think Juric will get the very best out of this squad, regardless. He's works on a budgeted kind of Torino side. I think he will do even better with this Roma squad. It's just a question of whether he'll push them enough to be in the European spots by the end of the season. But
this is always the question with Juric, right? This is always the question with Juric. He's not been at a club of this size, but he's always got them to like 10th, 8th, just not quite far enough. You think, okay, now is the time for you to kind of take that step. He's got to get this Roma team into Europe, because we talked about the squad is good enough. They've spent the money that they need to get into Europe, right? Yes. So this is like very much the brief of like, let's see if he can do it. I really like him as a coach. Serie A legend. I really hope he does well at Roma, but it's never dull for long. Let's go on to the last game we're going to talk about. Maybe last game? Probably the last game. Let's see how it goes. Andrea, Fiorentina got their first win of the season. Fiorentina 2, Lazio 1, 2 penalties. how did it happen? Goodmanson, 2 goals on his debut, right? On his debut?
Yeah, on Xavier. He came on at half time.
Yeah.
That was it. It was Goodmanson coming on, changed the game. Simple as. I think there was more fluidity. He was dropping deep. He was linking well with Moise Kean. And I think it just gave a spark that the team didn't really have in that final third. I think a lot of times it was kind of going out wide or kind of playing quite deep and kind of playing very structured way. But I think Goodmanson was allowed to express himself and kind of elevate that final third into a different like dimension. And I think that was really nice to see. And I could already see Keane and Goodmanson together like already could be a potential really good partnership. I think they have a real good chemistry in that second half. But it still doesn't cover the facts that I think again conceding a lot of chances. There's still that big issue, and Lazio still very unlucky not to get a point or even potentially win that game. Very fortunate, but again, some of the right choices. David De Gea in goal now, which I'm glad to see because I think he makes a big difference in kind of keeping Fiorentina in games when it doesn't go to their way as well. But yeah, I think first half was very similar to the previous games, very flat, very one style of play. But Goodmanson for me changed the game, and I think we were all looking at that Goodmanson when he comes into the team. I think then we can really judge how long or how good potentially Palladino can do with this team. But does question a lot that perhaps a lot of pressure or a lot of things on Goodmanson, because if he's not playing, are we just going to go back to flat again? So it does raise that question because we had this issue with Nico Gonzalez, so I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I can understand the PTSD with that. I'll be honest, I can understand that. I did also think Bove had a very good game. I like him as a player. I thought he played very well. I thought Gosens and Dodo out wide, or Dodo, did very well. It caused a lot of problems for Lazio. But Adam, do you think it was simply that Lazio didn't have Castellanos and Noslin on his own wasn't really as effective? Do you think that was a big miss for them? Because I feel like I like Noslin. Obviously, the manager knows him from Verona. He's a decent player, but I don't know if he's that first striker option just yet.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Castellanos has been phenomenal this season for Lazio. I think obviously he is the man that's going to replace the boots of Ciro Immobile as being the kind of target man for them. But yeah, it does feel like with this Lazio side, they are a few signings short of maybe challenging a little bit more higher up the table. We have to give credit to Marco Baroni because, like Andrea alluded to, the style of football in the first half, they completely dominated play. They really did take it to Fiorentina, and Fiorentina needed to make that change at half time with Goodmanson. Was the impetus for Fiorentina's game, really. I think that gave Fiorentina a lot more confidence going into the final third of the pitch. So a lot of credit, but yeah, I think Lazio were just a bit unfortunate, maybe, like you say, personnel were missing for this match, and that could have maybe made the difference in terms of the goal result. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how Lazio pan out this season because, yeah, I don't think they're a bad side. I just think they are just reliant on a few individuals in this squad at the moment.
I do also have to very quickly say another assist for Nuno Tavares in his increasingly very good start to the season. Yeah. I'm still waiting for it to all fall apart, but every game he keeps playing quite well. I'm like, oh, there is a player there. There is definitely a player there. But elsewhere, very quickly, just to wrap up the other games, Empoli continued their incredible start to the season. Now we get to talk about Pully the Flamingo with his blue cap. He's had a rough couple of weeks as he gets dragged in front of the ultras again to get another dressing down. But Cagliari in all sorts of trouble here. Empoli, I really like the Esposito finish. I thought it was a very nice goal, the second goal. All I wrote down was Cagliari just not clinical enough. Static defending. Gaetano was the only bright spark. He tried a really audacious finish that went off the top of the crossbar. And then shortly afterwards, he had another very good chance. But those were he was the only player I saw show anything for Cagliari. Andrea, just how bad are they? Is Davide Nicola going to see out the season? It doesn't feel like he might see it out once they've sacked him and rehired him, right? But do you think he'll get sacked?
Yeah, I think if this continues, there's got to be some sort of change. I think it also just goes to show how good of a job Ranieri did coming in as well.
Yeah.
But kind of like somehow managing him with that team. But I think they seem quite stretched all over the pitch, and I think that's a great point you said about being static. And I think once you start doing that a lot in games, you're gonna your heads are gonna drop. Your morale's gonna be different. And I think it's kind of a way where these defeats are gonna be coming. And I think what's the worrying thing for now is that they're getting easily beaten, which is the big worry of all. I feel like if you're in games and you get beaten, fair enough. But when it starts to be like a convincing loss, that's when it starts to raise questions. But we will see on that.
Big disappointment for Cagliari. Their home form was so important to them last year, and it's just not been here at all. Sardinia has always been a difficult place to travel to, and it just isn't at the moment. But Adam, Empoli, the blue bus rumbles on. What a start! What is happening in Empoli? It's incredible.
Yeah, definitely far exceeded my expectations, especially with Roberto De Versa.
Of course,
one
De Versa.
player
Yes, I know
De
that
Versa
one.
this time around. Yeah. What I do want to highlight is Colombo's performance as well. I thought he was really good for them, and he's showing the promise that we've kind of seen for the last few seasons. Obviously with Lecce, maybe a little bit to an extent at Monza, but yeah, it looks like inevitably he might be one that Milan do look to shift on, and this could be a great kind of chance to revive his career. I think there's genuinely an opportunity for him to maybe force himself if he can be consistent with his game. So full of credit, but I think you have to give credit to the whole team, because you got Gaiasi on one side, for example. They're really solid as a free, and behind that they got Vasquez in goal, who had a fantastic performance against Juventus in the last game week. So there's a lot of positives within that squad. I think for me, it's always about the consistency with Empoli and being able to maybe strive in the games they're not expected to win, potentially. One other player, Zhirkovsky, for example, he's currently injured. He's normally another player that seems to succeed or do well for Empoli. So it'll be interesting to see when he does come available for them, whether he adds a different dynamic to their game. But yeah, full of credit for De Versa and the way that they've approached it. Just hope he doesn't have that second half of the season slump and he doesn't headbutt another player or manager. I don't know what he fancies this time around, but yeah, fingers crossed for Empoli.
Exactly. An incredible start to the season for them. We talk about the table toppers, Verona 2, Torino 3. Shea Adams with another winning goal. It was to make it 3-1, but it still counts as the winning goal. Lovely little finish from Shea. There was a mad saved penalty, and then the rebound was offside in this game as well.
Yes.
But Torino are top of the league. Andrea, this is kind of, can they do it? Are they going to do it? Are we going to have a Leicester style? I'm tipping everyone. Udinese and Torino. Which one's it going to be?
Neither. No, definitely neither. Now, to be fair, I think the issue with Torino, and I really hope they get to Europe because they've been around there for so while. They haven't really got over the line. I really hope they can do it this season. But I still see those games, like we've seen that they've drawn home games against teams they should be beating. But they've definitely got better chance than Juventus. I'd have to say that for Juventus. But apart from that, I think, I think. To be fair, though, I feel like they've got a core players in that team that can really push on. I really like Ricci. I'm surprised he's still there. He's such a good player. I don't know how the national team doesn't get more opportunity. I mean, he's starting to now, but yeah, they've got some real key players in that team that they can build around. So yeah, hopefully they do well.
Fingers crossed they get Europe finally. They just have to. They have to. Adam, we've got this far without talking about Juve Napoli. We do quite well. I feel like the first half of this game was relatively interesting, and the second half was absolutely atrocious. How did you see this game? I thought Kvara was quite exciting. Anything else to talk about?
Lukaku missing in the big games, maybe perhaps. But then that could be also given towards Vlahovic and Yildiz as well. I thought they were terrible for this particular match, in particular Vlahovic, obviously. But yeah, I think there's the old age issue that we raised about Juventus. I don't think they've got necessarily the kind of clinical aspects in the final third. I think they're over-reliant on Vlahovic, and that's probably going to be something that they look to address soon, because they can't keep on trusting Dusan to have these kind of dry spells at the moment. He's not really producing, and I think he's struggling in the system potentially. It'll be interesting to see whether he's given another crack at this, but I just think Motta will start kind of pulling his hair out and kind of saying, look, there's not a lot more I can inspire in terms of this individual. I think he's maybe shot of confidence at the moment. He needs one to hit his ass and go in or something like that. He just needs something just to get a goal scoring run together. But yeah, I think if you look at the way that Juventus build up the play, they're very nice on the eye, but they've just got no end products at the moment. And yeah, I've already heard a few rumblings from Juventus fans. So it'll be interesting because they're already comparing Motta's style of football to Allegri's style of football and saying it wasn't all bad. They got results. So
what you have to remember about the black and white side of Turin is the only thing that matters is the scoreboard, right? It's the only thing that matters.
Exactly.
Beyond that, nothing else is important. So, of course, if you want to go revisionist on Allegri, feel free. Like, absolutely feel free. Because bring him back is all I'd say. I do have to say, I was really disappointed with Napoli in this game because the first half, they were like running at Juve. It was like instant pressure. It was like classic Conte ball. And I thought, right, if any team's going to win this, it's Napoli. Now, obviously, they've had the week off. Juve played, okay, they kind of strolled to a victory against PSV, but still they've played midweek, right? And then the second half, I thought, right, this is the time now. Like, foot down, absolutely run at them. They're going to be knackered. And they just seem to go, fuck it, you know what, we'll take a point. I thought I was just really disappointed in how, because I thought the second half they really could have had them on the ropes, but they just did not do it. And then finally, the last game, Monza won Bologna 2. Urbanski with a beautiful little looped header into the corner. Another exciting young Polish player emerging in Serie A. And Castro getting the winner with an absolute beauty of a hit. He's been struggling to find the net recently, and that felt like anger alone got that ball into the back of the net. You could see the relief. But overall, a pretty good week for Italiano. I think getting a draw in their first game in the Champions League against Shakhtar Donetsk, who are experienced Champions League regulars, you know, I feel like it's not a terrible result. And then getting this big win against Monza at home, I feel like, you know, you should be beating Monza at home, but Bologna have not looked good. So I think it's a big week for him, big week for Bologna. I think that is all Serie A action this week. Adam, well, and Andrea, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do our weekend preview. We'll see you on the other side.
Coppa Italia is back, guys, and what shall I do? I will start by talking you through this next round of games that are going to take place for you, listener, tonight, but also extend into Wednesday and Thursday. So we will start off with Lecce. They're at home to Sassuolo at 3 p.m. Then we've got the classic 7:30 or 5:30 kickoff time, and that is Calgary at home to Cremonese, before Torino hosts at home to Empoli at 8 p.m. Then on Wednesday, we have got Pisa at home to Cesena, Udinese at home to Salernitana, and Genoa at home to Sampdoria in what is a bit of a derby. But then we move into Thursday's fixtures, and at home on 5:30, we've got Monza at home to Brescia. And then at 8 p.m., we've got Napoli at home to Palermo, which is going to be a feisty affair, that's for sure. But we'll move into the Serie A fixtures, and we'll start off on Friday evening, where Milan host Lecce at 7:45 on Friday evening. And then you tune in to Saturday as at 2 p.m. Udinese host Inter at 2 p.m. Then followed up at 5 p.m. with Genoa at home to Juventus, and the 7:45 p.m. kickoff is Bologna at home to Atalanta. We then move into Sunday's fixtures. So starting off at 11:30, we've got Torino at home to Lazio. Then at 2 p.m., we've got Como at home to Hellas Verona, Roma at home to Venezia, and then at 5 p.m. we've got Empoli at home to Fiorentina before the 7:45 p.m. kickoff, which is Napoli at home to Monza. And then finally on Monday, the 30th of September, we will see Parma at home to Calgary at 7:45, and that is your Serie A fixtures, Rory.
Beautiful. Parma are playing on Monday a lot. Are they getting the Newcastle United slot, but when nobody watches?
Short straw, clearly. Yeah.
Just getting pushed out on the day when nobody watches. Poor Parma. They're bringing the entertainment. Well, Guys, that is us for this week. Another fascinating weekend of Serie A football. Absolutely loved every second of it, apart from Juventus Napoli. Andrea, anything to say? Well, no, wait. When our viewers and listeners want to find you, when can they find you online?
Yes, on TikTok, the handle at Calciofiore. Fiorentina and general content on there. You can find me on there.
Beautiful. I'm sure they will be doing so. Adam, anything to say before I send the listener home so they can go and listen to our Premier League episode right now?
Well, there is that as well, but make sure you continue to share the love on YouTube and our various streaming platforms, giving us ratings, reviews, and calling Rory a knob, as he alluded to on the previous episode. But more importantly,
it did seem to get more traction. It got more traction.
That seemed to work. So keep it up. That's all we can say.
I can understand. But guys, thank you for joining us. As always, we will see you next week. You can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. Hit the like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast, give us a like and rating. As Adam said, call me a knob. And we'll see you next time. Ciao, a dopo.
Ciao.
Ciao.